So if we are ready, we start with Alexandros Tourtas, speaking about building a new scientific diving framework from scratch, the Greek case. Please, Alex.
Hello. Let me check the pointer. So, yes, thank you. Great. Oh, too soon to speak, I guess. Yep. As the presentation, take two. Yes. So the purpose of my talk is to present a case study concerning the implications that arise in countries that do not have an established scientific diving framework and are trying to create one in order to regulate their scientific diving activity, both in terms of addressing occupational needs and defining social interaction. More specifically, I will be talking about Greece, and I will present you the ideas of a working group that has been developed in the past couple of years, brought together by the Science Diver Project. Let us start by saying that Greece has a long tradition of underwater scientific work. The richness of biodiversity, the country's impressive cultural archive, its interesting geological morphology, and of course, the clear warm waters of the Med have been extremely inviting to divers from all over the world and have facilitated the development of international underwater research in various fields of study. An impressive amount of underwater scientific work has been carried out in the past decades in various fields of research activities such as humanities, and more specifically underwater cultural heritage, and natural sciences and engineering. So the question is, what's the deal with Grecian scientific diving today? But before we do that, we figured that it would be helpful to find out what's going on in the rest of the world. Within the Science Diver Project, we conducted a study about training, legal, and occupational matters on a global scale. Okay. Can we lose the strip on the side? Okay, sorry.
I promise it's a better time.
Oh, that's fine, that's fine. It's totally understandable. I mean, these things happen. Yes, I think that's great. Thank you very much. So in this study concerning the current status, we can suggest that there are countries with an established framework, whether that is a tight one, closely attached to commercial diving, yet quite strong and effective in terms of professional acknowledgement and safety, or a more flexible one that can adjust to the various different needs of the scientific discipline, the environment, the dive type, and other variables involved. There are countries with no established framework who present either low scientific diving activity or emerging scientific diving communities and projects, and countries with no established framework but long tradition in scientific diving, who use indirect ways of regulating things. In these cases, there is a self-regulating community that uses tools eclectically from other fields of diving, namely the recreational diving standards and the commercial diving rules. That is more or less the case with Greece. We will see what that means in practice, but before that, let me introduce you to the major stakeholders in Greek scientific diving. First of all, we have the national agencies. They perform both research and administrative services in terms of protecting the underwater natural and cultural environment and regulating its interaction with society. For example, the Ministry of Culture, as we have seen with Dimitris Kourkouvelis, through its specified departments of underwater antiquities and speleology and paleoanthropology, engage scientific divers either in order to perform or facilitate underwater research, or in order to evaluate the cultural aspect of a region and assess the impact of development, construction plans, and underwater cultural heritage. Likewise, the Ministry of Environment and Energy needs data in order to define its environmental policy towards marine and coastal habitats. However, the ministry in this case does not have a special department performing scientific diving, rather than delegates this work to other stakeholders. Major stakeholders are also national research centers, institutes, and universities that carry out underwater research in an extremely wide range of disciplines. Just to name a few examples in this group, the Hellenic Center of Marine Research and the Fisheries Research Institute of the Hellenic Agricultural Organization have been diving for many years, performing studies in marine biology, biotechnology, aquaculture, etc., and are currently interested in developing new methodologies and extending their underwater projects. The Foundation of Research and Technology in Crete have been lately performing pioneer underwater work in cultural heritage management, and the School of Rural and Surveying Engineering of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki have been for more than a decade now developing new methodologies on underwater cultural heritage documentation. And there are more examples, of course. Moving from the public to the private sector, there is some serious scientific diving activity that is being performed by other enterprises or independent contractors in the field of development planning and in some cases monitoring. Most commonly, in the process of planning a new underwater or coastal structure, there is the need for scientific diving in order to gather information about the environment and the specifics of its interaction with the new structure. These studies are being carried out by other companies or individuals who are being contracted to do so. And lastly, there is the public. If you think about it, everything we do as scientific divers is ultimately addressed to the public, whether that would be pure research that is later transferred into popular knowledge, or studies concerning management of natural and cultural heritage, and infrastructure that is incorporated to public space and communal life. Although professional occupational matters are not part of this interaction, discussions about the basic concepts of scientific diving should not neglect this factor. Greeks have a long nautical tradition, and there is a strong maritime mentality that involves swimming and diving. Talking about ocean literacy and the role that scientific diving plays towards that goal, this is something that needs to be further discussed in terms of engagement. About the current status concerning the Greek legal framework. The general diving law that was signed, okay, for the back. Yep. So the general diving law that was signed in 2005 recognizes two types of diving, recreational and commercial. At this point, I should clarify what both terms entail within the Greek reality. Recreational diving in Greece is, as in any other part of the world, an entertaining activity, sport, a hobby. It's being carried out by recognized diving centers, following the rules set by the international sport diving community. Given the fact that it is also a touristic feature, one can understand the importance of this diving field in Greek politics and financial interests involved. Likewise, commercial diving in Greece is also an important professional occupational activity concerning heavy-duty technical work such as the use of specialized equipment, working under extremely dangerous environmental conditions, the recovery of either heavy, sharp, or dangerous objects, and other challenging tasks. Nonetheless, even though the tasks at hand are challenging, the framework in which they are carried out in Greece is a bit unsophisticated when compared with other national frameworks. Our point of view is that scientific diving should not be identified as either recreational or commercial, rather than to obtain a place on its own. So what needs to be done is to officially recognize scientific diving by legally defining its content, its basic operational guidelines, and its interaction with the other two types of professional diving in Greece. The scheme that we propose is based on two axes of distinction. The first criterion is obviously professional status. Professional/occupational status can only be achieved by people who are diving in the framework of their work. The second one is the purpose of the diving field and its requirements. Recreational diving is purposed for entertainment and requires nothing else from the diver than simply to follow the safety protocols they have learned in order to protect themselves, their fellow divers, and the environment. On top of that, scientific diving and commercial diving ask their divers to complete tasks and not to simply have fun. They need to be focused on safety and efficiency. The distinction between the latter two categories comes in the nature of these tasks and the way they are planned and performed. Scientific divers are not qualified to perform heavy-duty tasks addressed to commercial divers, and commercial divers do not have the proper education to carry out complicated scientific procedures. One can discuss an overlapping area where a scientific diver can perform simple commercial tasks and vice versa. In many cases, though, scientific underwater projects require the cooperation of both communities. And the scheme then has a place for trainees that can be regarded as semi-professionals if there is a need for that. And lastly, in the definitely non-professional status, one should add supervised or autonomous divers in the recreational column and the vague category of citizen science in the scientific diving column. Obviously, there can be non-professional commercial divers. The forthcoming ISO standards about scientific diving training will prove extremely beneficial since they can be used as tools in the effort to create a basic training structure. Moreover, they can provide insight and ideas in the discussion about both professional and legal matters. The fact that Greece is an EU member and the ISO standards will accept it eventually as European standards is definitely helpful towards the creation of the national framework. However, our ambition is not to have either the EU or some government officials decide what's best for scientific divers and wait for it to be applied. Thus, we're trying with this working group to bring all the stakeholders together to inform people who are interested in getting into the field and people that are already involved to get a broader picture of the issue by discussing the particular problems and goals of every stakeholder. In other words, we're working on a bottom-up approach that will prove beneficial for all parties. Of course, there are various impediments in this process. The first one, I would say, is ignorance. Imagine explaining that you are a scientific diver working on a project to a Coast Guard officer that has never had the term before. Most probably, they would not let you go on with your work since they don't have a clue what you're talking about. Even some people working for the aforementioned stakeholders are not familiar with the term scientific diving and its aspects. They may have been diving for years, taking part in excavations, coastal erosion assessments, environmental impact studies, etc., and not even once heard or used the term. All these scientists need to be informed and be aware of the situation they're in. The second impediment is indifference. There are two types of indifference. The first one derives from the status quo. So if it works, why bother? This type refers to stakeholders that have gained some benefits in the past or have found loopholes and other indirect ways of doing stuff. In most cases, they are afraid that steering the water might have negative results in their ability to operate. The second one has to do with disillusion. There are stakeholders that do not believe anything can be achieved. Most of the people falling in this category had at some point tried to change things, but their efforts proved to be futile. A major obstacle is also the conflict of interest between various implicated parties. And this can take the form of administration, political differences, depending on the strategic target of the government and the heads of various organizations and social groups. Most obviously, financial concerns, especially in the matter of professional/occupational rights, who does what and who's getting paid for it. And lastly, theoretical debates based on the different way people strive to solve a problem. It goes without saying that bureaucracy can be exhausting in this procedure, and it discourages a lot of people from going through with their plans. And lastly, international fragmentation. The fact that there is not one scheme that fits all, one plan that everybody can follow easily, means that we need to work really hard to find the right solutions for each case. However, even though there are obvious threats, almost everybody in the Greek scientific community acknowledges the benefits of a newly created scientific framework in our country from the bottom up. Using collective knowledge and insight from the people actively involved in scientific diving means that this framework will be closer to our needs and will address real problems with the actual parameters of the matter. It will not just be wishful thinking by people that have a vague idea about it. The discussions that are being held at this point and the next steps that we're planning, like the organization of national workshops and conferences, will help us engage more people in this process, not only the ones directly involved in it, but also the public, making them familiar with the subject of attracting young people to follow a similar path in science. Lastly, the creation of a commonly accepted framework will obviously promote the collaboration of organizations and individuals within the scientific diving community in Greece, but it will also help us communicate our views on an international level, representing the whole community and not just the organization we work for. Concluding, and on behalf of our working group, I want to say that we're very happy that the Science Diver gave us the opportunity to meet and discuss these matters with people from various scientific fields, various professional backgrounds in several regions, not only in Europe, but around the world. And we're hoping that we will be able to offer this gained knowledge in a constructive discussion towards the creation of our national framework. Even though compared to other countries, we're entering a bit late in this game, We can use this opportunity to form a progressive framework that will provide new solutions to our common problems without carrying around the inertia of already established traditional scientific diving framework. Thank you.